Hello, Simon Dixon here, CEO and co-founder of BnkToTheFuture.com, and we're here with Elizabeth Rossiello from the BitPesa, and we're going to do a quick investor update because so much has happened since we last speak. So, Elizabeth, good to catch up again.
Great to be here. Thanks, Simon.
So, where in the world are you right now?
We are in our newest office of Dakar, Senegal, on the westernmost tip of Africa, which is the capital of the West African bloc and the head of the central bank for the West African Monetary Union.
Brilliant. Okay. So since we last spoke, I think BitPesa seems to have a slight, I know you've been through a bit of a rebrand and a change in vision. I think you originally were somewhat of an exchange and payment processor for consumers that wanted to use Bitcoin in Africa. What's the new branding? What's the new vision?
So we're really focused on enterprise customers and business-to-business payments. And it was an organic change that came to us from our own clients when we launched in Nigeria last year, which is when we raised for the first time from Bank to the Future. We were thinking, what would the Nigerian customer look like? Would it look like our customers that we already had in East Africa? And well, the customers were always a lot bigger once we started in Nigeria. So larger transaction amounts, more for business purposes, importing and exporting, new regions. So since we're a Pan-African company, we have to evolve with our different markets that we operate in. There's a lot of similarities, but one of the main differences is that now we're seeing kind of a scaling up the vertical of the size of our customer.
Excellent. Okay, so one of the debates around the world, and it seems like depending on which geography you're in, Bitcoin is performing a different task. But for some people, and seems the user case that seems to be really going now is Bitcoin as a store of value versus Bitcoin as a currency. What do you see most in Africa? Is it Bitcoin as a mechanism for connecting international financial markets, a currency itself, or a store of value?
Well, I don't want to oversimplify a continental macro outlook because it's very different depending on the market. I mean, what's been happening in South Africa and Nigeria is drastically different than Angola and East Africa. But I think right now for BitPesa at least, and the companies that I've seen, we're not really seeing customers use it as a store of value, mainly because I think a lot of African consumers, and I don't want to generalize, haven't really seen currencies as stores of value. There's this trend, certainly in the markets we've operated in, as real estate or livestock or other assets as more stable for a long historical reasons. But what we're really seeing it used for right now is a way to kind of connect to other markets where there were no bridges, there were no corridors, or where there were bridges and corridors, they were very expensive and not that efficient.
Absolutely. Yeah, you bring up a really good point because very often people come to me and they say, you know, what's going on with Bitcoin in Asia? And Asia consists of so many different cultures, so many different user cases. So sorry for the generalization, but so do you see that across the different markets and areas you're operating in Africa that different user cases are coming up?
Well, let's focus on the few markets right now, such as Nigeria and South Africa, where we are not incorporated, but we do have a lot of customers and we work through brokers there, where you've seen extreme currency devaluation in 2016. Even in these instances, we're still not seeing a lot of consumers flight to alternative currencies as a store of value. What we are seeing them is not holding their local currency and being really careful about how they're managing their treasury functions. So businesses that might have kept store or kept float in the Nigerian naira or in ZAR for a few weeks or even days are now looking for instant real-time transactions because it's really hard to market a currency that's wildly different over the course of a month or even a week.
Okay. And so what types of companies, can you name any of the companies that you're dealing with, that you're having conversations with, or is it all confidential at the moment?
Well, our biggest customers are still confidential, but they include some Fortune 50 companies. So we're super, super stoked about that. And a lot of those customers came to us. And we're working with some great partners in the Bitcoin world. We hope to announce that soon, all around the world, who are helping us process to markets where we don't have a presence, like the United States and Europe. Although we have a small and growing presence in Europe, especially after this round. But what's been happening now with those Fortune 50 companies, they might not have been interested in working with a company that touches Bitcoin or touches digital currency. Whether you call it Bitcoin or whether you hype it up to blockchain or whatever, they still weren't looking to touch that 3 years ago. And now they're coming to us and they said, we don't care what you use. Does it work? Do you have compliance? Do you have liquidity and pricing? And when we say yes to those answers, they're willing to take the steps needed to get to know a small company like us. So that's been really exciting.
Great. Okay. Speaking of which, on the compliance side, we've being on the outside in a completely different continent, I keep reading these very sensationalized headlines about Bitcoin being banned in Nigeria, or warning banks to stay away. What's the real story that you're seeing?
Yeah, I mean, it's always funny. I've lived 10 years in sub-Saharan Africa, and the headlines that get sent to me by my friends and parents abroad and what I see down here are wildly different often. But let's not make light of it. I mean, the problem that we're seeing here is the same one we're seeing all around the world, which is governments around the planet are learning how they want to deal with this new technology. What is the categorization? How do we delineate which different business models are using this technology and which ones are regulated and not regulated? So it's the exact same scenario that we saw play out in the United States, in Europe, and Asia, and that's slowly starting to happen on the African continent. So the first step, which we saw in 2014 in the United States, was issuing a consumer alert, just saying, hey, this is not a regulated legal tender. If you're gambling in Bitcoin, if you're storing value in Bitcoin, just know it's at your own risk, the same as you would with any kind of a liquid stock or other security. So that finally came out in Nigeria, came out in Kenya last year. And sometimes on these consumer warnings, you then have a paragraph at the end that says, NPS. And what the additional thoughts were in Nigeria 2 days ago were actually quite encouraging, which were, we know that banks are working with these companies. We know that these companies are now moving into payments. And we know that these companies are now intersecting with the traditional financial sector. And that's okay if they have appropriate compliance procedures. And so we encourage the banks and financial institutions of Nigeria to ensure that their partners are doing appropriate compliance. And if they're not, stop working with them. And that's something that we've really been pushing and lobbying for the last 3 years since our inception. Unfortunately, BitPesa does not operate in the same markets as other digital currency companies around the world. And it's just impossible for us to take a lightweight approach to compliance. We have to acknowledge the fact that it's a different economy, a different government, a different macroeconomic system here. So we really do need to have very strong KYC, AML, with each of our transactions and our customers. And that's something we've invested in since day one.
Awesome. Okay. And before we discuss the funding round, you also went through some jurisdictional changes, and you've developed a bit of a roadmap for new licensing roadmaps and things that you want to do. Can you explain a bit about the company jurisdictions and what you're doing there?
Sure. I mean, it's been in the headlines for a few years that a lot of these digital currency companies were kind of seeking a home. What was going to be the best location and the best domicile for a lot of these companies? You saw some companies flee from New York with a BIT license come out and move to other places in the United States. You've seen them go back and forth between Germany or the UK, Switzerland, Estonia was named, the Netherlands has been part of it. And what we've seen emerge in 2016 was the licensing and the establishment of both blockchain.info and Bitstamp in Luxembourg. So we've joined them and we've become a Luxembourg group. And our subsidiaries, 6 of which are in Africa and 2 of which are in the UK, sit underneath that group. We've been really excited to work with the government of Luxembourg on this. And it's not an easy process, that's for sure. It's taking a lot of time and a lot of lawyers. We're working through it. And this follows our chief thesis from day one, which is to invest heavily in the infrastructure and compliance that it takes to become a global player.
Yeah, well, hopefully Bitstamp might have done a lot of the legwork that makes it a bit easier for you for the regulators to understand what you're doing. Let's see.
I wish that was the case, but everybody's got to jump over the hurdle.
Yeah. Okay. All right. So the final thing I wanted to discuss is funding. You've brought some new investors on board, and you've recently made a press release. Can you discuss a bit about who the caliber of investors are and some of what's been happening there?
Yeah, we're super excited to announce this round of funding led by Draper VC and followed up with our other new shareholder, Greycroft Partners, where Alan Patrikoff has been a great working relationship. And the cool thing about both Tim Draper and Alan Patrikoff is they have deep knowledge, deep commitment to sub-Saharan Africa, which is, I've got to say, having visited nearly every investor on 3 continents, quite rare to find. And we've talked about this a lot, Simon, when you first came in as a shareholder, which is that while BitPesa has been part of the digital currency family since day one, and we do use Bitcoin and we love Bitcoin to the end of our days, we are very much a frontier market company, and that differentiates even from Southeast Asia or South America. Working and being based and starting out in sub-Saharan Africa brings an entire planetary system of its own issues. And it's been really, really nice to finally find some shareholders that have some deep knowledge, deep experience, deep network, and deep value add to the region. So we're excited to welcome them on.
Awesome. Yeah, we were happy to co-invest and see them jump on board as well. So now the funding's secured, you've got a compliance roadmap and you're looking to get some additional licensing. What do you see now as the big opportunity for BitPesa and the market you want to fill in the years ahead?
Well, honestly, the clients have been there for a while, and the clients have just been saying, you know, when can you finish with the compliance, and when can you give us the time to get this going? And you know, now that the funding is closed, we have it. So we've got all the pieces of the puzzle to make this grow in a really exciting way. And we were making the growth happen, as you've seen in our numbers last year, without the puzzle pieces. So it was a little bit hairy. But now that we've got it in place, we can finally really maximize and capitalize on all the opportunity we've had. And you know, when you start on the bleeding edge of something, and while you've seen BitPesa's business model in some aspects in other companies around the planet, nobody's doing exactly what we're doing, and nobody's doing it on the continent. And for a long time, we thought, is nobody doing it here because this is a horrible idea? And now we're thinking, nobody's done it on the continent because it was an incredibly difficult journey. And we're through a bit of it. We still got a long way to go, but I think we feel very confident as a team. And I've got to say, we have an incredibly strong team, and we've had changes in the team, and it gets stronger each time. And we feel confident that we have what it takes to kind of go the long haul, and that's what it takes to do it in a market like this.
Great. Well, congratulations to you and the team. It's been really exciting watching this journey, and we can't wait to see that you can make this potential happen out there for the markets that you're targeting. So thanks for your time, Elizabeth.
Thanks, guys.